Good morning. I was attacked with kindness, and today I'm going to talk to you about my double life in high school. So my last 2 years of high school, I lived in two different places. On the weekdays, I stayed on Mercer Island, and on the weekends, I lived in West Seattle. Now, Mercer Island is a super interesting place because it's pretty elitist and it's kind of in its own bubble, which is definitely not helped by the fact that it is a literal island. And pretty much everyone at the high school there goes to college. Like 95% of my class ended up going to college. And this is very different from West Seattle, which is where I stayed on the weekends, and I also worked. I worked at a grocery store, usually 2 8-hour shifts on the weekends. And I remember on my first day of work, the guy who was training me, I was talking to him, he was in high school, I'm like, oh, so what extracurriculars do you do? He's like, oh, like none. I'm like, oh, okay, cool, do you do any sports or anything? And he's like, no. I'm like, oh, so what do you do? He's like, I just go to school and I work. And this was completely foreign to me. I never knew that there were people out there like this, but that's the reality for a significant portion of high school students in America. And on my Mercer Island bubble, I had never been exposed to this. And as I began to work more and interact more with my coworkers, I began to see the reality of minimum wage work in America, which is the reality for many Americans. There's one guy I knew, he would work the night shift from midnight to 8 in the morning, and then in the day he would go and work packing boxes for Amazon. A lot of people there worked a second job so that they could make ends meet. And this is stressful for a lot of people. There was one cashier that I knew, he had a kid and he only got 2 weeks of paternity leave. And his wife, who worked at a jewelry store, only got 1 week of maternity leave. And she was the one having the child. You know, I thought it was bad having to work 2 days each weekend, but most of these people were working 5-6 days a week, 8 hours a day. And for them, there was no foreseeable end. For me, I saw the end as being when I graduated from high school. But for a lot of them, that was all they really saw in their future. And this is where the double life thing comes in, because I'd go on the weekends and I would work and I'd be exposed to this world, and then I'd come back on the weekdays to the elitist bubble of Mercer Island. And I'm not saying this is diss Mercer Island. I love Mercer Island. In fact, I have a Mercer Island laptop sticker here, but that's just, you know, the reality. Anyways, like a lot of my friends, they would just ask their parents for money if they wanted to go do something, and they would get it, and that was all they had to do. And for me, that felt totally unfair. I felt like I was kind of an outsider because I lived this life on the weekends, and then on the weekdays I'd hang out with my friends, and it would just be totally different. It was also really difficult having to work 16 hours a week while taking really difficult classes my junior and senior year, having to do a bunch of extracurriculars and sports, and balancing that whole workload. If I was working the whole weekend for multiple weeks in a row, a lot of times what I would do is I would pick a day of school that would harm me the least if I missed it, and I would just take that day off to rest and catch up on work, because otherwise I just wasn't getting a break. And I think probably a third to a half of the time my junior and senior year, I was always a little bit sick because I wasn't getting that much sleep and my immune system was just super weak. I think that doing that much work was probably unhealthy. You know, I think people need free time to focus on their relationships and their spiritual life, but at the same time, there's also a period in life for everything. And in that period of my life, I was just constantly working. And it was super stressful, but I think I learned a lot. And there are many reasons why I'm glad that I did this in hindsight, but one of them is I think it gave me an appreciation for what minimum wage work is like. And I think if you don't actually experience that, you can kind of try to get yourself in the head of a minimum wage worker, but I don't think you can really fully experience it without just doing it. And I think that experience is important. I gotta see what life is like for maybe not the average, but many Americans, and I was able to expand outside of my Mercer Island bubble. And honestly, I didn't even get the whole experience. I was just working the weekends. I did have school on the weekdays, but you know, it's kind of a different ballgame when you're working 5-6 days a week at a grocery store. One thing that was really powerful and was a great experience for me was one of my coworkers, when he found out that I was going to Harvard, and this coworker was working while also going to college in Seattle, so he was balancing a lot. But what he said to me was, don't forget about people like us. And that was really powerful. You know, in my position, going to a super elite school, I could probably make a lot of money with my life. But in that case, what am I really doing? I'm just living for myself. I'm making money so that I can have a nice house, nice car, etc. But what does that really even mean? I think if you see your life as just this time on Earth, then that makes a lot of sense. You should try to make the best life for yourself possible. But if you think about it as the beginning of our eternal life, either in heaven with God or in hell, that totally changes the ballgame. So if I just forget that experience working that minimum wage job and go throughout my life serving myself, I'm really doing myself a disservice in the long term. You know, God says that what we do for the least of this world, we also do for Him. So by serving myself, I'm turning my back on God. And I'm no theological expert, but that sounds bad. And granted, it's easy for me to say this now. in the future when I'm actually put in that position, it's probably gonna be harder. So I need to make sure that I actually stick to my words when the rubber hits the road. So working a minimum wage job was good for the whole experience of perspective, but I also think it kind of gave me this badge of honor. You know, I felt like I was doing high school on hard mode. I was working on the weekends, I couldn't drive, I lived in 2 different places, I was taking the most difficult course load that I could, I did a bunch of extracurriculars and sports, and again, it was super stressful. You know, I have friends at Harvard, they say that high school for them was easy and not stressful, and that, you know, coursework is kind of ramping up now that they're in college. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Harvard is significantly easier than college. Maybe the workload is comparable, but you're not like working a minimum wage job, you're taking courses and doing things that you actually like. I'm just like, what are you talking about? High school is easy? No way. And I think I really proved to myself that I can survive in adverse circumstances. And, you know, sometimes I get jealous of those people who I think had it easy in high school, but in reality, I don't know their full story, for one. And also, you know, God has a path for everyone. And I have to trust that God put me in that circumstance because that was the best plan for his kingdom. And same for everyone else. And obviously, you know, it's easy for me to say this to a camera. It's a lot harder for me to think of this when I have feelings of jealousy, but that's the route I generally try to go. But anyways, that's all I've got for today. Feel free to leave a comment, tell me what you thought of this video, but thanks for watching.